I'm going to start us off with a question here, kind of related to the movie that we're going to be talking about. So, what do you think would be more scarier? Being haunted by a ghost or your own loneliness?
And I feel like based off of this movie, like I'm going ghost as my preferred one. I would much rather be haunted by a ghost than any of the stuff going on in Kairo.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you there. No, give me a ghost any day. And hey to everybody, how you doing? It is I, the Terrorific Lady, otherwise known as Brandy. Welcome to Retro Horror School Talks, where I drag a guest on kicking and screaming to gush about what else? Retro horror and our favorite retro horror movies. And with me, my latest victim is Briana, and it rhymes with banana. So it's not Briana, it's Briana. So welcome, Briana. It is so great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I'm super excited to talk about this one.
Before we get into things, tell everybody out there a little bit about who you are and what you do in the horror world.
Hi, I'm Briana, and I am a speculative fiction like author and screenwriter. So mostly horror and a little bit of sci-fi. So I've been kind of in this space for quite a bit, and I'm really excited to bring all of my very nerdy hyperfixation knowledge about this movie to you today.
Yes, and this is a movie that I honestly didn't even know existed until I was scrolling streaming services. I was like, what is this? This looks interesting. And then when I got through, I was like, oh no, I think I might be going through an existential crisis here. So the movie that gave me an existential crisis and was full of existential dread is Kairo, which is also known as Pulse. It came out in 2001 or 2005, depending on where you're looking, and it was directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. So it is a very slow burn, kind of J-horror cult classic, and it explores a little bit about how technology and the internet is supposed to connect us, but then also it leaves us feeling more alone than ever. So we've got people getting depressed. We got people being plagued by loneliness. We got people disappearing into dark stains on the walls and the floors and just and outside. And Tokyo just becomes almost just like this ghost town. It's like, this gave me a crisis. When I first saw this, like, what did I just watch?
Yeah, it's one of those. I'm sorry for recommending this one. The second I heard
an existential crisis, everybody. That was my first time experience with Kairo. So what was your first time experience with it? Do you remember when you first watched it? Did it give you the same kind of existential crisis that it gave me?
Yeah, I would say so. Like, I came to this one like relatively late compared to some other horror movies. So I didn't watch this until I was like in college, where I was like studying like Japanese language and like Japanese media. And Kiyoshi Kurosawa was one of the people who I was looking into. And like, I wasn't supposed to watch this movie. I was supposed to watch one of his million other movies, but this one just seemed super, super interesting. So I wound up watching this when I too was a sad college student, like Kawashima in this movie. So it really hit hard. And I don't even want to say I liked this movie the first time I watched it, but I keep coming back to it. And like, I watch it like once a year. So it's just one of those movies that sticks with you a lot, I think.
It really does. There's something about it that just leaves you. It's a movie that makes you think. Was this your first exposure to J horror, or had you watched other J horror movies before you came to Kairo?
I was kind of getting more into J horror at the time, so I was like a kid at the time of the J-horror American adaptation boom. So I was in elementary, middle school when that happened. So like any kid who's watching media, I didn't really internalize those. It's like, oh, this is an American remake of a movie made in Japan. Like, I just knew that, like, The Ring and The Grudge freaked me out. And I did not really process them as being J-horror until, like, much, much longer. I believe the first J-horror I ever saw was, like, Ju-on, which is, like, the original version of The Grudge.
Yep.
Where I saw it, like, late night, 1 a.m. on, like, HBO or something, and it traumatized me a lot. But that was really the first kind of indication, like, in my brain that, like, oh, people from other countries are also making horror movies, and they are very different from the ones that I am used to watching. After that, I kind of got more into the more, like, mainstream ones. Like, I watched all the Ju-on movies, and I watched Ringu, and I watched, like, One Missed Call and all of that. But Kairo was a little bit more obscure, so it took me more to find it, I think.
Yeah, like I said, even the remake passed me by. I wasn't even really aware like of the remake of Pulse like at all, but from what I hear, I'm probably not missing much.
You are not. You are 100% cool with missing out on that one.
No. But yeah, you mentioned that there was just this J-horror explosion in the early 2000s, especially. So we had Ringu, which became The Ring, Ju-on, which became The Grudge, and Dark Water, which became Dark Water. And then Kairo even received its own remake. We had all these J-horror remakes. So some people have thoughts about remakes or rants, like as they were. But do you think that remakes of J-horror films may helped introduce new audiences to J-horror? They watch these remakes and then later on find out that they're J-horror films, and they're like, "Oh, I gotta go see these."
I wrote an entire thesis on this topic, so stop me if I start rambling too much.
No, ramble,
but,
go.
Yeah, I'm, like, just as like a filmmaker and as a writer, I've always been super, super intrigued by the like J-horror Americanization boom that happened back then, because there's such a weird and like interesting disconnect where these films have been like thoroughly Americanized when they are being remade. So like The Ring like is a very American movie in how it is structured. But at the same time, like people watched that and they were like, this is Japanese. This is Asian horror. This is something different. There's a very, very interesting kind of mismatch of audiences at the time watching it and identifying it as something very distinctly Asian, but also it being a very distinctly Americanized version of an Asian movie. So, like, saying whether or not this got people into, like, J-horror made in Japan, I'm actually not sure. I know it got them into Americanized versions of J-horror movies. So, like, all of those got very popular, and there was a huge boom. But some of the, like, more original films, I think you still have to get into kind of, like, pretentious filmmaker territory more to start watching. Because there's still that like subtitle barrier that lots of people have trouble getting over too.
Yeah, and whenever I think of like a lot of these, not just J-horror movies, but foreign horror in general, a lot of the complaints I notice are about subtitles. And just a little tangent, but I always go back to Bong Joon-ho when he won the Golden Globe for Parasite, and he even made a public declaration.
자막, 서브타이틀의 장벽도 아니죠. 한 1인치 정도 되는 그 장벽을 뛰어넘으면 여러분들이 훨씬 더 많은 영화를 즐길 수 있습니다.
Once you overcome the 1-inch tall barrier of subtitles, you will be introduced to so many more amazing films.
Something about that always stuck with me. Like, granted, there are probably some reasons why people can't read subtitles. Like maybe there's like a visual things like going on there, or they have difficulty with reading the subtitles. But I'd say if you don't have difficulty with reading subtitles, then just why not just give J-horror a shot?
And I always recommend people use subtitles for just like English language movies too. I think they just overall help what your like overall comprehension of the story is. So like I say that as a cognitive scientist. So that's kind of just me being all up in my academia brain too. But yeah, just put subtitles on everything. It's helpful more than not.
Yeah, I had a crappy TV, so I had to turn on subtitles like to even like understand the dialogue, and then it's just, like I got used to them. Now I really have a hard time watching anything without subtitles. So I have to have them now, or otherwise it's just like the movie doesn't feel complete to me. We've been talking just a little bit about Kairo, but has this movie in any way influenced you as a horror fan, as a speculative fiction writer, or is it just one of those movies that's just like, okay, this is interesting, and then you set it aside, and then you said you come back to it once a year?
Now, this film has definitely impacted just like my own like storytelling sensibilities, I think. So like to prep for this episode, I like read and watched a few interviews with Kiyoshi Kurosawa, who like wrote and directed this. And I resonate with that man so much, it turns out, because he just talks about, like, I don't really know what genres are. And anytime I try to like abide by genre conventions, I wind up making something that everyone tells me is genre blending anyway. And I feel like that's something that always happens to me, where like I just say speculative fiction for all of my stuff because it is very kind of nebulous what genre it falls like hard and fast into. And like the same can really be said for Pulse, where like, yeah, it's a horror movie, I guess, but it's also just like a philosophical slow burn drama movie. And it's also just like a movie about like friendship and just like a weird mystery thriller. So there's a bunch going on in this movie. And I think just having that very complicated, hard to define genre is something I gravitate to as a filmmaker as well. So yeah, I really liked that interview I read of his where he was also just saying like, screw genre. I don't even know what that means.
Genre, I don't know her. Yeah, there's even like so much argument about genre going on, especially in like you mentioned in the horror world, because so often not someone will say, oh, for instance, this is a psychological horror. They'll go, no, it's actually a thriller, or it's got drama elements in it. So I just say, you know what? As long as it's a horror movie, who cares? What's all this arguing about genres and stuff?
Yeah, definitely. And there's always that like genre stigma as well, where like something is a horror movie until a bunch of people like it, and then all of a sudden it's a psychological thriller movie. So like we can just like horror movies and it's fine.
Yeah, exactly. It's perfectly fine. You don't have to call it something else just to like because like maybe you're embarrassed or something. Like, I don't know why you'd want to call it like something else, but like horror. I mean, there's nothing bad about it. Well, I mean, there are some bad things like about it, but like it could like scare the crap out of you. But yeah, horror. So get
my brain. If it like scares you, it's a horror movie, and it's as simple as that.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that ended up really creeping me out, just in particular, about this movie, beyond the existential dread, are just, even though I said I would rather deal with a ghost than my own loneliness, ghosts, they're pretty creepy in this movie. That they're not the kind of ghosts that scream at you. They're not the kind of ghosts that chase you and like, I must have revenge. They're not even really seemingly malicious. It's almost like a manifestation of depression in a way. They're terrifying in that way, but yet they're also like, help, help, help. Just like, maybe even want companionship. Like, I don't know. These ghosts seem very emotionally isolated in a way. What do you feel that these ghosts or this film in general have to say about the concept of emotional isolation or just isolation in general.
Yeah, this film has a lot to say on just the topic of like isolation, and even if you are physically with people, not being like emotionally or psychologically present, so that can still lead to isolation. And something that we didn't really touch on before, which is super important for this movie, is that this is like an internet horror movie.
Yes.
So this takes place in, I think it just takes place in 2001 when it came out, maybe 2000, where like the internet is just starting to be a thing that people have just in their households, and people are still learning what it is. One of the main characters like has no idea what like websites are, and like no idea how to like log into stuff. It's
Or
a very,
bookmark
very
them.
early internet horror movie that kind of, you know, very ahead of its time, pegs it for the problem it's going to lead to, which is, oh, it's going to connect so many people in kind of a superficial surface level way, but it's going to like isolate us even more in those like meaningful connections things. The main character, Kawashima, he gets on to like his computer for the first time, and just like a random evil ghost website pops up.
It's
Or
like,
just people
"What's up?"
being sad in front of their webcams, and like he doesn't know that that's weird. He doesn't know it's not normal. He's just like, oh, I guess this is part of the internet. And that really like liminal uncertainty of not knowing how interactions on the internet are even supposed to work, I think really lends itself to that sense of isolation, because it's like this method by which we are supposed to connect, but no one knows how to use it, and no one knows like what is normal in these interactions. And that sense of uncertainty of, I'm not sure how to use this technology in a way that's actually helpful, just permeates this entire movie. You see that with the ghosts too, where like, I don't even know if we know they're ghosts. I'm calling them ghosts, but they could very well just be like a weird simulacrum of data and code that's come together to like haunt people. Like, it's never specified what they are. Like, we just know they're connected to this like technological isolation.
That's actually a good point. It's like the ambiguity there. Like, I call them ghosts too, but who knows? Like, are they ghosts? Are they just weird binary code ones and zeros that are floating around like out there? Or are they very, very sad people?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Like, I feel like the only time anyone is ever called a ghost, it's when one of the characters is pointing out that, like, no, people just being sad and isolated and alive are pretty much ghosts. So there's no difference. And, like, those are the only things called ghost in this movie, which is living people who are sad.
Yeah, I think that's Haru said that, if I'm remembering correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, she goes on a whole like philosophical conversation on like people pretty much exist as ghosts now, where they're physically present but they're not actually interacting with anything, and like they're here but they don't have an impact on stuff, which is effectively being a ghost even if they're alive. I'm not afraid of ghosts, and that's when ghosts are brought up.
Yeah.
So yes, very sad.
Yeah, but it's even just the idea of that you mentioned earlier that points out like two people that are even in the same proximity can still be disconnected. And we see that a lot even nowadays, where two people, or it doesn't have to be two people, I guess it could be more than two people, but people sitting at the same table, even like having dinner and still on their phones. I mean, they're around other people, but they're not really connected with one another.
Yeah, and it's a really kind of like interesting, complicated symbolism going on, especially with Kawashima's character, where he's the dude who's always in Hawaiian shirts.
Yes.
Much. We're like, I don't think he would characterize himself as someone who is lonely, really. He seems like someone who is comfortable in solitude, but he's confusing like that comfortableness with something everyone else has as well. So he's just content in himself. He doesn't even want to get on the internet. He's kind of just doing it because it seems cool. It's like his entire character arc is him learning that, like, oh, other people are not as comfortable with solitude as I am. And I'm like missing out on all these meaningful connections that I could have by just assuming that people have that same feeling, that where like him hanging out with Haruo is literally just him realizing that, oh, some people actually do ruminate on stuff and I should like pay attention to that and like lend some of my optimism because like, they are having a tough time.
Yeah, I guess what suits one person is not necessarily going to suit another person, because we as humans are an inherently social species. We crave social interaction and connection, just no matter the form.
You see people trying to do that in this movie. I think it all goes back to like there's a very symbolic computer simulation, like computer model screensaver thing.
Yeah.
That kind of ties all those themes together, where she's like a bunch of dots floating around the screen, bouncing around, and they want to be close together, so they're like drawn together, but if they actually touch, they disappear. So like they get close and then they have to go far away again, then they get close again, and then if they're drawn too close, they just blip out of existence. And that's kind of how all of the relationships are structured in this movie. So it's people who are very, very emotionally distant from each other, even if they're like ostensibly friends. And then like, oh, something really bad happens. So they get close and then they actually have a moment of genuine connection, and then someone dies. And then the person drifts away again. And that's every single relationship here. It's just them ping-ponging between needing connection and like imploding if they have too much connection. So very complicated.
Yeah, it is. And so these characters are surrounded by this illusion of connection, or just the idea of connection, but then it seems to at times even make them more lonely and isolated than ever. And isolation and loneliness, I think, are such powerful fears in horror. What is it, do you think, about just loneliness and isolation that is so terrifying?
No, I think it's like every other kind of aspect of horror where like, yeah, dude, like chasing you with a knife is scary in a very visceral way.
Yeah.
But like horror has like staying power and it sticks with you and it makes you watch it at least once a year, like me with this movie, because it's about something that's much more like simple and much more relatable. So like, yes, ghosts are scary, but you know what's scarier than ghost? Like telling your friends that you have suicidal ideation and no one caring, which happens in this movie.
Yeah.
Whereas everyone is just so emotionally numb and emotionally distant from each other that any attempt to reach out to someone for like genuine connection is just rebuffed and ignored until it's too late. And this movie is a bunch of people trying to make a connection with their friends after it is too late to do it, which is like terrifying. It makes you want to call your mom and say like, hey, remember I love you? Because I do.
Yeah. Love you, Mom. Like, I really do. Just remember that, even though earlier in the movie she's like, ugh, Mom, get away from me.
Yeah.
So it makes me think of this line like in the movie, and I wrote it all down because I was watching it yesterday to prepare for this, and so I just like paused. I was like writing it down as I was watching it, and they call, I guess, spirit. I also heard the word spirit come up in this one. So here's how the line goes.
魂、まあ意識、霊魂、何と呼んでもいいんだけど、それを受容できるエリアっていうのは残念ながら無限大でもなかった。それが一体何億分何兆分受容可能なのかは知らない。でもいつか必ずいっぱいになる。いっぱいになってもうこれ以上入りきれない。ぎゅうぎゅうで何とかしてどこかへ溢れ出ようとする。でもどこへ？そしたら魂は別のエリア、つまりこっちの世界へ進出してくるしか方法がない。
That's another instance where I hear them. They're called ghosts, but not really. For the sake of this, we're just going to call them ghosts.
Yeah.
What metaphor do you think that they serve? Like, whether they're ghosts, whether they're very lonely, sad people that are trying to exist in this world. What the heck? What the heck are these things?
Yeah, and there are like so many different readings of that line because like every other part in this movie we've been talking about, nothing is for sure. This one character thinks that this is what's going on, and it's never specified if he's right. That's just like a theory he has. He kind of characterizes it as like just this overflow into our reality, which is very like Greco-Roman, which is interesting with how they think the afterlife works. But it really reminded me, like watching it again, like especially now in the context of like the 2020s, of just like liminal spaces and like these very like Silent Hill-esque like areas that are separate from reality but also connected to it, where everything's just distorted and atemporal. And there just being a very weird relationship between what is the real world that we are in and what is like a liminal space. Because the longer this movie goes on, like the more liminal spaces these characters fall into, where you're not sure if they're even in reality anymore at a certain point. And it's never specified. You kind of have to feel what you feel about it.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of the liminal space. It reminds me a lot of the back rooms, just like in a way, where just like these characters, maybe they're stuck. There's so many different interpretations. Maybe they're stuck like in hell or some kind of limbo or something like that. It's just like, it's frustrating, kind of the ambiguity, but then it's also like impressive. It's like, wow, I could interpret it one way, and then someone else could come along and interpret it a completely different way. So
yeah, there's like a reoccurring like phrase or motif throughout it where there's like forbidden rooms. And like if you don't go into a forbidden room, you are fine. And like the forbidden rooms are like a physical liminal space, but then it also characterizes like the internet as like this metaphysical liminal space that's also a forbidden room, where it's kind of like, at least to me, implying that us trying to go into the forbidden room that is the internet is what has let all of these things out. Where, like, I don't know, the line between like what is actually like a physical space and what is not is very blurred, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, it's so prescient too in a lot of ways, because the term chronically online comes to mind. People that just live their entire lives on the internet. And so that line is blurred between like, okay, well, you've got this physical world, then you also got this digital world. And in the case of being chronically online, they kind of coincide, and like what's real and what's not anymore. No.
Is like what spaces are real spaces, what relationships are real relationships, what really distressing imagery you see is a real thing happening and what is fake. So it just really blurs the line between what is like understood as real and what isn't. Because I feel like a bunch of these characters would be better off if they just recognized the weird evil ghost website as bad from the get-go, but they're like, oh, it's the internet. It's whatever. People are weird on the internet. So they just don't do anything about it.
Yeah.
So, like I said, that liminal area of just not knowing how to interact in these spaces is like shooting people in the foot.
Yeah, there's also like the I know the rooms, the forbidden rooms have like red tape on it, if I'm remembering correctly. So one guy grabs this roll of red tape. He's like, I'm gonna tape up all these rooms and nobody's going to go in them. But what do we do whenever we're told to not do a thing? We do the exact opposite. We do the thing. So
yeah, this movie is full of people being explicitly told, hey, don't go into the room with red tape on it. And then people going into the room with red tape on it near immediately after that. Which did like annoy me the first time I watched this movie, but then on like repeat viewings, like going back to that like dot simulation, it's like, oh, that's what's happening. Like they're just living out what this simulation shows of, oh, they've become too distant and now they are compelled to get closer to something, even if it's going to destroy them to do it. So yeah, it symbolically makes sense. I'm not annoyed by it anymore, even though it's kind of funny on first view.
Yeah, sometimes it takes multiple watches of something to be like, okay, I get it now. Just like it may have annoyed me the first few times I watched it, but okay, I get it now. It's fine, maybe.
Yeah, and we're not talking about like 2004, 2006 Pulse, wherever it came out, but
No.
the red tape in that movie is hilarious. Like how much of a MacGuffin it is.
Okay, I haven't seen it, so I'm gonna take your word on it.
Yeah, like they take the idea that red tape is ghost proof and like run with it in that movie in a very hilarious way that I don't think was supposed to be funny. But yeah, not talking about that one.
We've been talking a lot about space in this movie, and like you mentioned, this film plays with it a lot just when it comes to liminal space. There's also the forbidden rooms that are their own form of space, like doors leading to dark rooms and seeming voids. There's a lot of distortion going on here too. There's distorted images on computer screens. There's even distortion like going on sometimes when people are standing in rooms, and there's even distorted phone calls, which I don't know if you could call that space, maybe the space of sound. We're going to get like a little philosophical here, but setting that aside, what do you think makes spatial distortion, so taking spaces and distorting them and twisting them and shaping them, what do you think makes that so effective in horror?
Yeah, I think that adds like so much to the tension in this movie because like it is a slow burn. So just the fact that like nothing is technically going on, but there's always just this slight distortion happening really just puts you in a very uneasy mood throughout this entire film. And something I noticed a lot more on whatever rewatch I am on at this point is that like we don't just have like post-production distortion, we also have just like distortion in the camera work too. So we're constantly seeing characters through like dirty windows and through tarps and through curtains. Like there's always something distorting our view of what is going on and like putting like space and a barrier between stuff, which fits really, really well with our themes of people just not being able to see each other, not being able to connect like on a personal, meaningful level. And like that distortion being both in like how we see it just like presented through the camera work and also in post-production distortion is super, super effective in like getting across that theme that like people are not seeing each other in this universe. They can never directly interact.
You see what I mean by just like this movie causing like existential crisis and existential dread? It's just like,
yeah, it's so savage, so good. It's so good.
It's like, watch this movie if you're in the mood to be sad. And I know it's very weird to say, like, if you're in the mood to actually be sad, like, watch this movie. But yeah, if you're already sad, you may not want to come like to this movie. But if you're in the mood, you're like,
yeah, I always warn people, like, you have to be in a headspace for this movie. Like,
exactly.
do not watch this movie if you are very, very depressed. Like, do not do it. Like, do it when you're feeling better.
Exactly. It's not like a slasher movie that you could put on where the killer's just running around chasing people with a knife, and sometimes it may have goofy elements to it. It's just like, no, this movie's pretty heavy. So
Yeah, like, it's fun to watch from like a nerdy filmmaking standpoint, where like I just went on a whole rant about how, like, oh, the framing and the blocking, like, it's fun in that way. But if you're someone who wants to watch a movie and turn your brain off and have fun by like what's happening, this is not the movie for that. Kiyoshi Kurosawa has other movies that are fun for that, not this one.
So speaking of like this movie in particular, is like I didn't even really know of its existence until literally, I think last year is when I watched it for the first time. But it was quite a while back last year. So when I watched it this time, it was almost like I was watching it again for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more of a cult classic. I even heard of Ringu and Ju-on before I even heard of Pulse. So I'm not sure if Kairo, like, maybe it was just swept under the rug, or if it didn't get the same amount of attention as those other J-horror movies, but I find myself thinking about that movie in particular, just Kairo, a lot. So do you think that, do you think this movie is underrated? Do you feel like it was swept under the rug? Do you feel like other, maybe arguably bigger J-horrors overshadowed this one in a way?
I think a lot of stuff was going on, like conspiring against this movie being bigger than it was, both like internally and externally. Because just like externally, a bunch of like Hollywood BS was happening. Where like a Hollywood studio bought the distribution and adaptation rights for it in like the early 2000s, and then just like sat on a shelf for forever. And they didn't distribute the original, like with Ju-on and Ringu to begin with. So it just wasn't out in the ether. And then when it finally got an American remake that could arguably lead people to the original, it was way, way into like the Asian horror remake trend where they were getting very bad and no one wanted them anymore.
Yeah.
Where, like, Ringu and The Ring and Ju-on and The Grudge were like the S tier ones. And then like in the coming years, we got like, what about like The Eye and Uninvited and One Missed Call and Shudder? Where like they're all like way more underwhelming. So it was really just like caught up in that wave of like underwhelming Americanized remakes of stuff that no one wanted anymore. But like to like more on the end of internal stuff, I also think Kairo is a more unique movie in just like its portrayal of horror and just like its tone, because stuff like Ringu and Ju-on are very, very like traditional, where they have Yurei and Onryo, and the ghosts look like Japanese ghosts, and they behave in ways that you would like think a Japanese ghost behaves. So it's like, oh, they're vengeance spirits. So it's very easy to like Americanize those or bring them over to the States and have people be like, oh, what a fun, novel Japanese movie I'm watching. But the ghosts in Kairo are not very stereotypically Japanese in any way. They're also not very stereotypically like Western. They're their own thing that's very hard to describe.
Yeah.
And I think just generally this movie being very hard to describe works well for it in the cult classic sense, but did not work very well in like trying to get it attention when it first came out.
Yeah, I don't know much about its theatrical release, like if it even got any. Maybe you would know more about that than I do, since you said you got the big, like the fancy DVD, like the Blu-ray thing with all the interviews and stuff like that on it. But I looked up as far as like money-wise, it didn't even like make that much. Like, did it even get a theatrical release?
I believe in Japan it got like a limited theatrical release.
Okay.
And it has a novelization that is like only in like Japanese and French. So people aren't coming to it that way anyway, at least in the States.
Oh.
And it's a very weird situation because Kiyoshi Kurosawa as a director is very prolific and had a lot going on at the time. So, like, I feel like this movie not doing as well financially was kind of just like a drop in the bucket. I'm going to go on to the next thing now. Because, like, that man is making movies like crazy in like the early 2000s.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about this movie in particular, and later on, we have a slew of internet-style horror, like tech horror films. Do you think, and I can't even like begin to name them all, just like probably the most recent one that I saw that sticks out in my mind is fear.com.
Like the chain letter one.
Yeah, like the whole go to the website. It's fear.com.com. Oh.
Yeah. I remember that one. That's a fun one.
Yeah, I was laughing like at that one. Just the fact that they had to type out fear.com.com. But before I get off onto a tangent as to how silly and ridiculous having to type something like that out is, do you feel that Kairo is, I guess, the gold standard of those kinds of movies, like the internet, like horror, tech horror based movies, and that it influenced those kinds of horror movies coming out later on?
I do think Kairo, of just how complex it is definitely, at least for me, the gold standard on how to do these like borderline Luddite, I'm afraid of the internet movies. But like, it's so hard to say if it like influenced any of these other films or not, because it has a lot of like iconic things happening, but they've kind of just like become archetypes for like internet horror after a while. So like, I just do not know if it's just so happened to be like very similar or if it's a direct homage to what's going on. Because like there's a shot in Kairo that like I think is lifted wholesale and put into the Unfriended movie. But like I don't know if they did it on accident or on purpose. Where like someone has like a webcam looking at them from a closet and they have to like turn around and like see like, oh, this webcam's staring at me, so I see myself on the screen. That happens in Kairo in 2001 and then happens in Unfriended in like 2018 or whatever.
Huh.
So who knows if that was like an homage or if that was just a scary internet thing that everyone is doing when they're making an internet horror movie.
Yeah, like
I do think it really set the standard for like what internet spooky stuff looks like. A lot of stuff is derivative of it, even if it's not meaning to be.
That is a good point. Nowadays, an internet horror movie, I feel, would be very old hat. Either people grew up in the analog era and then just like, then they're also familiar with the digital era now. I'm one of those who remembers like the first like dial-up internet. I'm showing my age here. And then there's people who have grown up with technology and the internet their entire lives. So it's a normal everyday thing to them. But yeah, if I was watching an internet horror movie like now, I guess that came out now, I would just be like, I'm not really that scared.
Yeah, I feel like I agree with you. Nothing has really hit in that like the internet is scary way, like since Kairo came out, which, you know, very ahead of its time in that way. It was the first one and also the best one, I guess.
So what if this movie came out today? So Kiyoshi Kurosawa decided, oh, in 2025, I'm going to make this movie about existential dread and how pretty much we're connected, but actually not connected. Do you feel that it would resonate as much as it came out if it came out today, more deeply if it came out today? What are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, at this point, where we are just like in the horror infrastructure and filmmaking infrastructure in general, like I think this movie would hit so much harder if it came out now, which is why I wanted to talk about it with you, because this is one of those movies that just keeps getting more and more and more relevant as it gets older. Like it's very much like an unintentional period piece of like the late 90s, early 2000s in like the technology it uses. But like what it is saying about technology is just continually more prescient as we go on. And I feel like if Kurosawa just directed this and put it out now with literally no changes, it's a period piece. It's not current, it's a period piece. It would like hit like a ton of bricks at this point, where it's just like predicting what is going to happen and like predicting that isolation that like everyone in this loneliness epidemic we're feeling now is definitely feeling.
Yeah, it's like I felt like he was telling the future with this movie. Like you mentioned, it was very far ahead of its time. And if it came out during the pandemic, which is like a time where everybody was pretty much cut off from each other and not by choice either, it's just like, wow. Yeah. Yeah, I feel that it would hit really just hard too in that aspect, and especially like where we are with technology, and we've made great strides in understanding mental health and how to try and help people out the best way that we possibly can with that. It's like, yeah, like I think it would hit like a ton of bricks, but in the best possible way. I mean, the best possible way a horror movie can.
Yeah, that is why I like always recommend this as like one of my go-to horror movies. Like with the caveat that you should not watch it when you're sad.
Yes, exactly.
Like it is just such a hard-hitting movie, and just its themes that like you cannot watch this and like not take something out of it. Like you cannot watch this and not be impacted by it, especially in like the year of our Lord 2025 when everyone is sad on the internet together.
Yes. Group sadness.
So, like, it's just like a perfect movie for that. And also just in that like horror infrastructure where people like Ari Aster and Robert Eggers are getting way more popular, where people are liking that slow burn a lot more. Like I think it would do so well to get a re-release.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It would fit in perfectly, I think, with the whole A24 thing. It's funny that you mentioned Ari Aster, because every time I hear someone talk about Ari Aster, they're like, what happened to him? What trauma did he have to endure to come out with this kind of horror?
Well, you know, Ari Aster hates his mom. And that's all you have to know about any of his movies. Like, he has mommy issues, and it makes good movies.
Okay, I did not know that. That explains so much. Hey, if you're digging this episode, why don't you go ahead and hit like and subscribe? I've got more horror deep dives and episodes of Retro Horror School Talks on the way. And if you want to keep the horror going even past this episode, I'm always posting extra stuff over on Instagram and Threads. Just look for Terrorific Lady. Plus, if you're feeling generous and want to support the show, my Ko-fi link is in the description. All right, back to it. So, from a storytelling standpoint, just in particular, and you're a writer, you write a lot of speculative, like style fiction, horror style fiction. How well do you feel that Kairo hits from a overall storytelling standpoint?
And the thing that is super interesting about Kairo in that way is like there's a lot of like atypical elements of it thematically and just how it's visually presented, but its actual structure, I would say, really fits well within like the Kisho Tenketsu story structure, which is a very like Asian way of like telling a story, where it's essentially slow burn, stuff happens a little bit, stuff happens, a bunch of stuff happens, and then at the like peak of stuff happening, it like ends. And that is a very, very good description of how the story is structured within Kairo, where we have these like two kind of separate plots that eventually converge, and then everything gets worse, and then the story's over. So that is a super, like, I really, really love that story structure. I try to use it a bunch in my own writing, which is another reason why I really like this movie to go back to a lot. It is also a story structure that popped up in Ryan Coogler's new movie, Sinners, and is one of the reasons why everyone is so divisive about it. We're like, oh, the pacing. Oh, the pacing is bad. It's like, no, the pacing is very East Asian and not like Western. So that is another example of that popping up. And I really, really like pointing that out because so many people look at that pacing and say it's paced like wrong or weird, where it's really just another way of doing stuff that hits really well if the storyteller knows what they're doing. If you liked the pacing of Sinners by Ryan Coogler, this is essentially structured the exact same way. It's just a much, much different plot.
I want to see Sinners so dang bad. It's we're dealing with a sick dog, so we have to like stay a lot like with her. But I have heard nothing but good things about it. Like from my side of the internet, it's just like I'm so jealous. I want to see it.
It's like an excellent movie, and I was like so happy to see a blockbuster movie that uses that story structure, because for so long it's been kind of dismissed as like the wrong way to tell a story. And I'm loving seeing it more in like these bigger movies now.
Like I had never felt that there is no wrong way to tell a story. It's just how well it's executed. Just like you mentioned, that story structure can work really well in the hands of the right person, or it can go horribly wrong. It just depends on whose hands it's in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now we have come to the portion of this thing here that I like to call the what if portion. I'm very big on whenever I'm watching things, I like to put myself like in the character's shoes or the particular situation they're experiencing, or just like, just think about just like, well, what if this happened? So here is our what if for this movie. What if the characters had never, I guess, visited the websites with the ghosts. We're going to call them ghosts. The ghosts on them. So there's two different plots going on. One has a floppy disk that they use to figure out this website, and one just straight out they visit the website just like on accident. It came to them. Say none of that ever happened to these characters. There's no floppy disk. That website didn't pop up for that guy, and they just went on living their lives. Do you think that they would have been spared, I guess, from everything going on, like turning into a wall stain? Or do you think that they would turn into wall stains or disappear, like no matter what they did?
I am going to go with a hard no. They are not getting out of what's happening.
Oh, no!
Where like the story is structured in a way where it's actually kind of similar to like the Japanese Ju-on movies, where like the like apocalyptic nature of what's going on is made pretty clear by the end. Where like in Ju-on, it's like, yeah, this curse that like spreads exponentially is eventually going to just destroy the entire world based on that logic. And like the same thing happens in Kairo, where like by the end of it, Tokyo is like empty. Like no one is in this city anymore. So like it's almost like a series of like vignettes where like we're seeing these characters and how they got into it. But like it could be any other character in any other place in Tokyo. Everyone is getting haunted by an internet ghost and eventually is going to blip out of existence, which is sad. But you know, lots of J-horror does that, where they're just like, and everybody dies no matter what.
And nobody is spared, and then who knows if it's even going to spread beyond that, or if it's going to be a self-contained thing and just Tokyo alone or Japan alone, and everybody else is safe. It's just like, and who even knows
that? They mention like in the movie that like they're not getting signals from anywhere, and they're just gonna try to go to South America to see if anybody is still alive. So yeah, I'm pretty sure just the apocalypse happens by the end of this movie.
Oh, wow, yeah. I like bleak endings like that if it's done right, because horror sometimes to me is not meant to be wrapped up in a pretty little bow with a happy ending. And even like say if one person survives, final girl, final guy, just like whoever, the things that they're going to have to deal with after the fact, just like, can you really call it a happy ending even if they survived? I mean, I don't know.
And I don't know, this movie tries to end on a happy note, kind of.
A happy note?
Might be actual friends with the one other guy who's alive. And then it kind of just ends. So I don't know, maybe their relationship was long and fruitful and nice. Who knows?
Yeah. Or maybe they also disappeared and just turned into stains.
Yeah.
Kurosawa. Yeah, it's like you made such a really good, sad horror movie. That's all just like that's all I can say about that. But now we've come to the retro lightning round, or I like to call it the retro lightning round. So I've got a few questions. Just say the first answer that comes to your mind. Don't overthink it, but you can ramble on for that answer as long as you want, or you can make it as short as you want. It's entirely up to you. All right, so here's the first question for you. All right. In this world of existential dread that we've got going on in Kairo, do you think that you would survive, or do you think that you would eventually be blipped out of existence too?
Oh, no, I have an Edgar Allan Poe tattoo. I would like melt into the wall immediately in this universe. Like,
yeah.
I'm too much of a sad girl to survive this movie.
In this world now of, it seems like movies are, not all movies, but some are being made into TV series. Do you think that Kairo would work well as a TV series, or do you think that it would lose that sense of existential dread and creepiness if it was stretched out, like say across 8 episodes?
No, like I'm sure if like a really good filmmaker got their hands on it, they could do something interested in with this. So I don't want to say I don't think it would make a good TV or miniseries. But at least as of right now, I think 2 hours is good on this particular plot. I think there's only so much you can like get out of like story and narrative wise of people are being sad and then they see a ghost and then they melt. But you can get 2 hours out of that. I'm not sure if you can get like 10 hours. I don't know. If Park Chan-wook wants to like make a movie based off of this, I'm not going to say no, or like a TV show. But as of right now, I'm good with it just being a movie.
Yeah. I'd say, yeah, if you stretch it across a lot of episodes, it's just going to be too much sad. And then like when the last episode ends, I'll just be like even more sad. I'm like, why am I so sad?
No, and like they tried to do a mini series for like The Grudge or like
Yeah.
Ju-on. It had to just be like a completely different like story because the actual story within the films I think is just so contained.
Yeah.
So I think as a movie it's good right now.
Yeah. I would agree with you there. We've talked a little bit about favorite scenes, favorite moments in the movie. I know one that was mentioned was the one where the two characters were in the same apartment, really close proximity, but different rooms. That's one that really stuck out. You mentioned that as really sticking out. What's another like image or moment from the movie that has really just it's burned into your brain?
Well, there's like two separate ones. Like the obvious one is the scene everybody talks about in this movie, which is the first time you see someone like die by internet ghost.
Mm-hmm.
Where like the character Yabe goes to that other apartment that we were in at the very beginning, and he winds up getting confronted with a ghost that is extremely creepy, and he tries hiding from it, and it doesn't go very well.
No,
like,
it does not.
The entire way that scene is filmed is super interesting, just from like a filmmaking standpoint. Like, I want to say they filmed this woman walking backwards and then played it forwards again to like make it seem so jerky and off-putting. But that is like the first time we see someone in like a more like straight and narrow horror situation in this movie, and it works very, very well. But from like a narrative kind of point, I feel like all of my favorite moments in this movie are like the really small snippets of like 1 minute scenes where the characters are finally like actually talking to each other, whereas like all this time being emotionally distant and not being helpful, you're finally sitting down and talking and telling this person, I care about you and you can talk if you want. And those are all good scenes because like by the time they all happen, you're just like hoping and wishing someone would just like be there for someone else.
Yeah.
So like when Michi like tells Yabe like, oh, are you like, did something happen? You can tell me. I'm not going to be mad. I'm not going to like judge you. You can talk to me if you want to. Or like Michi taking care of her other coworker by like making her soup and bringing her to her house to get better. Or like Kawashima being like, we can move in together if you're so like sad and lonely. We could like balance each other out and it'll be fine. So these characters finally just acknowledging the way they're doing things isn't working and trying to make that jump into being emotionally vulnerable are all very satisfying scenes. And none of them go anywhere because this is a sad movie, but they try.
Yep. Yeah. Bless their hearts, say they did try, even if it just ended up being too little, too late.
And I think that's a good thing to take out of this movie. Like, do not wait to do that stuff until it's too little, too late. Just do it now.
Yes.
Like, call your mom. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. No better time like the present. Check in on your friends. Call your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your family members. Don't wait until you're just like, no, I'll do it tomorrow. It's like, yes, our worlds get very busy. We all tend to get wrapped up just in the busyness of things, but I think that's a good point. What this movie reminds us of too, just take that moment, take that pause, just to check in on the ones that you care about.
So yeah, all of those moments where people actually did that are very nice.
Yes, because it's the one like happy part in just the middle of all this sadness. Oh. So it's a nice, like, little, I guess, breather and break from the sadness before it goes back into being sad again.
Yeah, like right before all those people like melt into the floor, like a nice thing happens.
Yeah. And all right, last of the retro lightning round questions. So you're wanting to do a double feature with Kairo. You've got this really sad J horror film, and you want to double feature it with another J horror film. What film would you pick?
Yeah, like I would probably go with like Tetsuo the Iron Man.
Ooh.
When's that from? Like 1980, 1988, 1989.
Yeah, I
Like one
think
of
you're right.
those. Like they have very similar like alienation and technology themes. Like I feel like both of them you could talk about when you're talking about like techno orientalism type stuff. Like, oh, how does like Asian culture interact with technology? How is it portrayed? All of that stuff. But like Tetsuo the Iron Man is an insane movie where it's very loud and very weird and just very surreal. So I feel like watching this very slow burn, sad movie that is Kairo, if you want something that has like the same themes of like technological alienation, but that is just like balls to the wall insane. Like that's the Iron Man is a good pick.
That is a good pick, and it definitely plays like if you think this movie plays with the idea of distortion, like Tetsuo's just like
Yeah, Tetsuo goes like it takes the distortion route and just goes body horror with it instead of just like camera work. So if you're a body horror person, that is the movie for you.
Yeah, it's like a mix of Lynchian and Cronenberg styles of movies, like all just like mashed up together. And I think if I remember, it's filmed in black and white, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But whew, good pick. So just going from very sad to very weird, just like in the same.
Yeah, it's like very understated and quiet to the most bombastic thing you have ever seen, pretty much.
That is a good double feature. So people, if you're in the mood for a double feature and you want to watch something right after all the sads, watch that very kind of balls to the wall movie Tetsuo the Iron Man. That is good. I might have to do that sometime myself whenever I'm in the mood to be sad again. I'll watch that one right after it.
Yeah, like, I don't think I've ever done a double feature with Kairo. It would be a good idea. Like do Tetsuo, do Houseu, do one of those weird ones.
All right. Oh, as they say, all good things must come to an end. And with this must come to an end as well. So I want to thank you, Briana, for diving into this world of sad and more sad and existential dread with me. I
Someone's
really
in a Hawaiian shirt though. It's happy sometimes.
So it's happy sometimes, but yes, it's just thank you for talking about this movie with me and giving your thoughts and your insights and analysis and stuff on it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I had so much fun just ranting about this movie with someone who likes horror movies. It is such a fun movie. Well, fun. Right. Go watch it when you're in the mood.
So are those the only last thoughts you have about why people should watch this movie? Or do you want to add anything else onto that as to why people should voluntarily dive into this world of sadness?
No, I think we touched on all the big parts. Like, I know it's 2025. Everyone is chronically online and needs to touch grass, and this is the movie for that. So go watch it.
Go watch it, and you will definitely want to touch grass after this. So now, before I let you go for realsies, tell everybody what you're working on, or just like things that people should keep an eye out for, and where they can find you on the very existential and sad internet.
Right, you can find me a few places. I am most active on like Instagram and Threads under Pedro Paro 2 after the Pedro Paramo book, which you should also read if you like this movie, by the way. I also do a Coffee, Ko-Fi, however you pronounce it, where I do like book and media reviews and just like different analytical perspectives on media in Briana Cox Writer at Ko-Fi. And I am releasing a horror book next year through Graveside Press. So I cannot tell you more about it because we're marketing. But follow Graveside Press. Follow me on Threads. You will know more about it. It's vampire adjacent. It's very fun.
Ooh.
So that is all my stuff, I think.
Yeah, definitely be following her on social media because I follow her. I follow her on both Instagram and Threads, and I see her a lot on Threads. She always has such good insights, especially into books, because I'm constantly like, I need to get back into reading. So I'm constantly just like, oh, this looks good. Oh, that looks good. So now it's like a Netflix list of books that's just like,
all the book recs are on my Threads if you want that.
So
yeah, like occasionally movies. I'm dropping an Asian horror movie recommendation list for AAPI month, like today at some point. So take a look at that too.
All right, yeah, good time in there. So the links to
an accident, but we made it work.
Yeah, it's just like unintentionally, just like it's just good timing there. And you will find the links to everything that she has mentioned down in the description box below this video. So to everybody out there, thank you so much for watching this episode of Retro Horror School Talks. Please like and share with fellow horror fans, and subscribe if you like listening to people talk about horror, their favorite horror movies, and sad existential horror movies. So class is dismissed, everybody. I'll see you next time. And